All right. Shalom, shalom, Israel. Can everybody hear me all right? Let's start with that. Make sure I can be heard all right before we get to going too much. If y'all can hear me all right, if I can get a one in the chat, I would appreciate it. All right. All right. I got a one. All right. The water. The water. We are the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, started out at 1 West 125th Street, under commanding John Yahada out of Harlem, New York. Uh, this is Monday night's history class. I want to say Shalom Yahweh Shem Shabbat to the brothers, Yahweh Shamar Al Thun, Shem Yahweh Shah to the sisters. Uh, let's see. Do some shout outs real quick. Officer Yagadar in the building. All right. Trooper Kazaki in the building. Shalom, brother. Hope you feeling. Hope you still feeling good. Still coming back. Good to see you in class, brother. And my rib, Sister Aya, Sister Aya in the building. All right, all right. Water for everybody. Appreciate y'all. So we're gonna hop into some history tonight. As you all can see by the title, uh, dreadlocks are not black culture. So to give y'all a little bit of background on kind of what inspired me to do or to look more of this information up, we say it that way. So over the weekend, uh, we all the brothers went out to this reggae festival out in Newport News, and that festival, um, like that festival. But what our plan was to go out and talk to some meet some brothers, some sisters, hand out supplies, promote the school, which is what we do. Um, but we get out there, and no exaggeration, there were more Edomites out there than brothers and sisters out there. And this is at a reggae. It's the third annual reggae festival in Newport News, and there was I mean Esau was everywhere. There were crystals and all type of edibles and everything anti-Bible, everything against the Bible, um, and against the scriptures was everywhere. Even the band, they had a live band, and I think only one brother. There was only one brother in the band. Everyone else was Edomite and Esau, and it was a bit of a shock. I don't think any of us expected that. Um, but the more we kind of thought about it as we were out there. Again, there's a lot of our culture, um, even outside of the Bible, how we conduct ourselves, how we our swag, if you will. That's always being appropriated by Esau and these other nations, right? And so, the more we thought about it, the more you think about, a lot of the messages, at least, especially more recently from reggae music, it's all about, everybody coming together and and everything, being accepting of everything and everyone, and everybody can party and everybody come have a good time. And of course, you have uh, the marijuana aspect of it, the weed aspect of it, which is all inviting for everyone. Um, and so obviously, the more we thought about it, the less surprised we were. Um, that being said, repetition, we always say repetition is the key to learning, and it absolutely is. Um, now, dreadlocks and marijuana, right? If anybody has been in, you know, one or two of Captain Natazak Nashad's classes, he often speaks on what those uh, how those practices, how having dreadlocks and smoking marijuana are not of our culture and how it's really the worship of another god. Now, who can tell me who remembers what that god, the name of that god? Who remembers what that god is? Who remembers what the name of that god is? Anybody want to give it a shot? If you don't remember, that's fine. All right. All right. If Officer Yaga down here, he is absolutely right. Absolutely right. The god or goddess, LOL Shiva. Now we're gonna get into why that actually is a perfect answer. The perfect answer. Well, yes, that is the name of the god, Shiva, right? And again, repetition is key in learning because we're standing out there, we're talking, and Cap is teaching as he often does. And he repeats this that dreadlocks and smoking weed is an East Indian culture, and it's a practice that is the worship of the god Shiva. And what hit me while we were standing there was I've never seen an East Indian with dreadlocks. So Kana La'a, if you have seen an East Indian with dreadlocks, Kana La'a, if you've seen one, Kana La'a, if you have not, I've never seen one. Who else has? Maybe it's just me. Who else has seen an East Indian with dreadlocks? All right, my rib said La'a. She has not. All right. Who else? Who else? If you have seen an East Indian with dreadlocks, Khan. If not, then La'a. And make sure y'all sign in with your name, city, and state in the chat. All right. Trooper calls for par in the building. How about you now, Shabakata? Birthday check in for something. Now think about it. La'a. Right, exactly. La'a. I've never seen it, right? And shout out to Trooper Kazaki. Damn right. He in the building. Uh, let's see. Officer Yagadar says, not here in America, but I have seen some of the yogis dance. Right. I give even online on TV. That's cool because I don't think I've ever seen one there either. Just it was I hadn't thought about it. Right. So by the time Cap said that again, Saturday, and it hit me, I was like, whoa, that's crazy, right? So it led me to do some more research to find out how is this possible, right? Because the question is, if this is an East Indian culture, how did it get to affect the Caribbeans and the Jamaicans and all our brothers down there? This is an East Indian culture, one from my perspective that most of us did not know and do not know. So how is it that it affected our brothers so much? So that's what we're gonna get into tonight, right? But let's keep talking a little bit. So the who's familiar with? Hold on. What's the next question I want to ask? Okay, so from my Jamaican brothers' perspective, right? A lot of them that are still lost and in the world, right? Smoking weed and dreadlocks are part of what type of lifestyle belief system? Uh, I believe you maybe be able to call it a religion. Who's familiar with that particular? Uh, belief system or religion as to why they would say that they wear the dreadlocks. Who's familiar with that? Who's familiar with the belief system? Officer Quashah in the building. How about Shana Shabakatah? All right, give Officer Yagadah a hand. Rastafarianism. Right. That's the belief system. Now, who's familiar? Who has a rough idea? And if you can put it in the chat with your what your understanding of what Rastafarianism is, if you have one. If not, then you don't know, and that's absolutely fine. My rib said Bob Marley made it cool with his eating my day. Gosh, that's exactly, exactly. Who has a perspective on what Rastafarianism is? Call out. Who wants to give it a shot? Or don't know. That's fine too. All right, my rib said to get high, love, happiness, and peace. Now, surprisingly, that's what you would think. That's absolutely what you would think. And that's probably what it's turned into now. That's not the origins of it though. The origins of it were a little bit different than that. All right. Okay. True Kazaki says I heard it was a worship of the god of Shiva. I don't really know. Okay. All right. Um that's I think that's might be part of it. That might be part of it. We're gonna get into it. No sweat. Officer Yagadan is listen. He's on. We early in class, and he's on it tonight. That high I think it's high salal sal, that person. I got it in here. I'm gonna practice that before I get too into it. Was Jesus? Now that we'll get into it, but there was somebody that there was a in particular person that they believe was the second coming of Christ. He is absolutely right there, and that smoking weed gets you closer to God. He is absolutely right there. And love fixes all garbage. Exactly. Exactly. It's absolutely right. All right. I thought it was the what? I thought it was highly like that. That last one is just is that the right spelling? Let me make sure. I had it before class. It was rolling off, and everything. So Selassie, Selassie. I think it's highly Selassie. I think it's that's how you pronounce it. But yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Right. So, where are we? Where are we? Where are we? So now I'm gonna give everybody a chance to guess before we get into it. Um, what do we? Is it? If you had to guess, what might it be related to as far as how our brothers in the Caribbean got some type of influence um, from East India? If you had to guess how that took place, what mechanism might have brought that on? What might your guess be? All right, I got one answer. Who else wants to give it a shot? All right, all right. So Sister I says exposure to the people. I would guess how. No clue. Okay, no sweat. All right, give Trooper Kazaki a hand. He is absolutely right. Slavery. Give Officer Yagadar a hand. He is absolutely right. All these things were related to slavery. All right. So we're gonna get into it now. How we gonna walk through this thing? We're gonna get into some of kind of the background and kind of what the understanding of Hinduism is, which is East Indians religion. All right. And then we're gonna get into how that became or that how that then uh, came to influence our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, and then we'll get into how um, what they kind of did with the Rastafarian movement. All right, so we're gonna be real high level because we're not trying to get into too much of this nonsense. Okay, before I start that, matter of fact, we're gonna see. I'm gonna pull this scripture. We are going to see this whole thing is very it's a great example of Romans 10 and 2. All right. All right, let me share this real quick. What I wanted to do? Uh oh, I'm messing up. That's what I wanted to do. There it is. So Romans 10 and 2, it says, For I, no, that's not. Oh, yes, it's like it. For I bear them record that they have a zeal of God, but not according to knowledge. Well, we are going to find out that these brothers and sisters had and have a zeal for the Most High. And in a lot of ways, um, in a lot of ways, it's a good zeal, but it's not according to knowledge because it takes a, a good intention, it takes a good spirit, it takes a good disposition, particularly towards the oppressor, um, and it turns it into something completely different. All right, completely different and completely against the scriptures of the Bible. All right, so let's go to this article. Yeah, and we're gonna be skipping around this. probably way too small for y'all to see. Let me know if I need to make it a little bigger. Let me see if I can. One other thing. Let me know if that's too wild. I mean, you can only make it. It might not be, but we're gonna keep going. All right. So, nope, that's not what I want to know. All right. So, Hinduism got like this one says many practitioners believe that Hinduism has over 330 million gods, and some people believe it only has one. I'll let you know right now. This is some confusion. All right, that these people are dealing with because they don't know whether they got one god or over 300 million of them. That's fine. That ain't even our business. All right. But it says at some point during Hinduism's long transformation, there arose three central deities, one of which you can see is Shiva, the destroyer. Some believe that these three personalities present different aspects of an absolute divine being or conception. What does that sound like? Some Hindus believe that these three personalities represent three different aspects of one absolute divine being or conception. What does that sound like? Who can tell? Are y'all not seeing what I'm showing? You are? I feel like it keeps skipping on my screen. All right. Salaki. I don't know what is happening right now. Who can tell me what that sounds like, though? Okay, that is what it is. Right. Right. Give Officer Yaga a hand. Sounds like the Holy Trinity. Sounds like the Holy Trinity. My real hand says sounds like schizophrenia. She's absolutely right too. She's absolutely right too. They're both of them, man. But yeah, it sounds like the Holy Trinity. It sounds just like Christianity. It's exactly what it sounds like, and we're gonna see that a lot of this, um, that the Christianity is the oppressor's religion, the oppressor's uh, uh, multi-deity pagan religion that they believe in all these different gods. They don't say that, but that's exactly what it is in practice, right? Um, and we're going to see where some of this, it seems like it has a direct tie to the oppressor. All right. But let's keep going. I don't know if I'm going to keep dropping that or not. I'm having technical difficulties. Let's keep going. All right. It says the god Shiva is often associated with sexual potency and uncultivated or dangerous aspects. Shiva is often referred to as a master of yoga. That goes back to what Officer Yagada was saying earlier. Master of yoga and is commonly depicted as practicing constant austerities and meditations as with his long hair twist Salaki, with his long matted hair twisted around his head and his body covered in ashes. Now, this says his. All right. So let's stop that real quick. And let's look up some depictions of Shiva. Now earlier, obviously Yagada said God slash goddess, right? Let's get some pictures of what they say Shiva looks like. Now, now, so that's supposed to be a guy, apparently. You don't see it? You don't see it? Salaki. Uh, hmm. All right, let me see something else. I might have to go back this way. All right, we're gonna have to maybe ride with this. Y'all can see that, all right? Let me get a one or a one if you can see it, a two if you cannot. I think we might be having a couple technical difficulties. Y'all let me know. All right, the water, the water. Right. So this clearly is the most androgynous thing I've ever that's crazy. I don't know how you call that a male or a female, right? And let me see. Let me keep looking up some because there's a few of these out here, and they are interesting looking. This one's another one. Let's see if that's gonna come up the way I want it to. I mean, that does not look like a man. No change. All right. I think something's going on with my screen. I'm seeing this has changed. Okay, it sounds like there might be a delay. All right. I don't know how this is gonna work then. All right, we're gonna figure it out. So yeah, there's no way that that looks like a man. Let me see. I caught some of these other ones. Here's another one. Let me see. All right. So again, there's no way that that's a dude, but he does have, or Shem does have those dreadlocks, all that hair. There's pictures in here where they got forearms, and all of them look high as hell. Um, try to pull up two more if they can come up easy. I don't know. We're gonna see. So this one absolutely looks like a female's head on a man's body, and she is completely stoned. She is absolutely out of it. So like it. Y'all let me know. Are these images changing real time for y'all? I'm getting somebody saying that there was a delay. Y'all let me know. Wow. Y'all let me know if is there a delay with these images coming up? Kind of like better yet, if they're coming up okay and switching kind of as I'm talking, then y'all let me know. Give me a one. If not, give me a two. Because if not, I'm just going to stop showing them. All right, I'm not sure what to do with this, so we might just gonna stop. Okay, y'all got okay. The water. Okay, so they're going all right. All right, the water. Yeah, so completely zoned, right? Completely stoned out of mind. This is another one. All the same deal, right? So Let me go back. So yeah, that's the image of their god Shiva. Okay, it says in addition, Shiva is also believed to demonstrate the mastery of yoga via the ingestion of intoxicants such as marijuana. So they gotta get high. They gotta get high so they can do yoga well. That's something to be praised apparently. Um, many characteristics near many of these characteristics near constant asceticism, which is supposed to be restraining yourself from self indulgence and things like that, but they're getting high. Wearing long matted locks covering the body in ashes and ritualistically smoking marijuana are replicated by Shivists, or in other words, people who worship the god of Shiva. That's what they do. That's the part of the culture, is part of the practice. That is part of the traditions, the worship. And so when our people are doing these things, wearing these dreadlocks and blowing all this ganja, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know that this is part of a ritual. That's what these people that worship these gods do. So again, how does it get to how does it get over from East India to the Caribbean? All right. Um, Before we go there, so they have a book, right, that they have their so-called teachings and everything in. So let's get a little bit about the nature of their book, right? It says the sacred scriptures of Hinduism, believed to be produced by the Aryan inhabitants of India. What does that word Aryan mean? Who can tell me? What does it mean, Aryan? All right. Whoops, I thought it had to do with white supremacy. Okay, that is true. That is true. It does have to do with white supremacy. Officer Yagadar said Esau, exactly. Edomites consider, white supremacists. They consider themselves to be Aryan, which is essentially, for all intents and purposes, it just means European. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. Now, if we look up the actual definition, um, it has Indo-European. It says or of or relating to a hypothetical ethnic type illustrated by or descended from early speakers of Indo-European language. We all know what that means. If you're a descendant of European, you are essentially an Aryan. And that's what they call themselves. There's another one that says using Nazism to designate a supposed master race of non-Jewish Caucasians, usually having Nordic features. That's what this is. So their book was believed to be produced by Aryan inhabitants of India, right? And they're collectively referred to as, I'm gonna butcher all of these names. So don't nobody, nobody check me on that. I'm gonna tear all these names up. If I'm wrong, just flow with me tonight. It says they're collectively referred to as the Vedas, a book of knowledge, right? It says the Vedas are considered to be eternal truths created by neither God nor human. So they believe that none of these things were created by anybody or God, But it's believed that these writings were produced by Aryan inhabitants of India. So keep that in mind going forward. All right, just keep that in mind because essentially they have a book written by Europeans that they believe are eternal truths and are so special that God, no human could have created. All right, so keep that in mind for the way this thing turns out later for these folks. Okay, now going to the the East Indians, right, with dreadlocks. There we go. Going to the East Indians with dreadlocks. We just walking this thing down a little bit so we can get the history, okay? Seduce, that's what I'm gonna say. Or Indian holy men. That's what they're the Indian pastors. Let's call it that, right? Are characterized by their ritualized uh, asceticism and renunciation of material possessions, meaning they try to be very strict on their refraining from self indulgence and material possessions. That's supposedly what it is. Except for a handful of personal effects, such as a staff, maybe a water pot, an alms bowl, prayer beads, and I'm not sure how you pronounce this either, we'll call it a chillum pipe. What do they put in the chillum pipe? Somebody guess. Who can tell me what they put in the chillum pipe? Or however you pronounce it, in their pipe. Damn right, get a sister. They put weed in it. That's exactly what they do. All right. So they don't believe in having, they believe in refraining from self indulgence. They don't even want much. You give them a staff, a water pot, a bowl, some prayer beads, and a pipe, and they're good to go. They are good to go as long as they got the pipe and everything else. All right. It says uh, the Indian pastors, 'cause I'm not going to keep pronouncing that word, generally employ to various degrees ritual symbolism such as nakedness, matted hair, and covering themselves with ashes, which is very similar to what the description of Shiva was, right? So now let's look for, that is not what's supposed to come up. If I spell it right, that might help. That might work. Okay, so I got to pick certain pictures here because y'all see the nakedness uh, was part of their approach. So I'm trying to make sure I'm not showing y'all anything I don't want to. All right. So I think this is a good one to start off with. Let me scroll over. So this was one of my first times seeing an East Indian with some damn dreadlocks. Look at that. That is something. And this is what he planned to look like. This is purposeful. This is how you know he is in their truth. He is the example of what their religious leaders supposed to look like. He got the matted hair, got it all wrapped up, paint all over him. He is killing the game in Hinduism. Let me see. We get some more. These three. If that comes up okay. Some of these might be too small. They are some interesting. Let's see if I can make this a little larger. little bit larger, right? Um, couple more I really wanted to get y'all because they look. You can see the description, but it's nothing like what it is, and it's not what our brothers and sisters walk around doing. But it's again, you can see how this is just not our culture. This is not us, but we adopted these things. This cat, man, that's big on. I'll bear with me. Not working around. I guess this supposed to be yoga. If y'all cannot see that, this brother's feet, well, not brother, this cat's feet is on top of his head. He's got these dreadlocks. This is what their religious leaders are. This is who the religious leaders of the Hindu belief system is. Right? There's another good one that I want to show you. This is another one. You can see the dreadlocks back there. All this ash all over him. This is all again, this he is considered to be a holy man in India. All right. This is where dreadlocks originated. This is their culture. Uh, yeah, we talked about that. All right. So now let's get into how this happened. All right. Says British imperialism had more to do with the development of Jamaican spiritual culture than may be initially apparent. The desire of the British to colonize numerous nations around the world eventually led to the intermingling of a wide array of various cultures. At one point, the British Empire covered 30% of the Earth's total land area, and slavery was an essential component of that empire. As early as the mid 16th century, which is like 1500s, 1550, or whatever, it became apparent that there may be profit in shipping so called African slaves. And by the end of the 18th century, you're talking about 1700s, England was exporting some 38,000 of the 75,000 slaves taken from Africa every year. Now, we know that this is this is a that number's underestimated, all right? But just using their numbers, 75,000 every year, even if you do just 3 years, the 300 years, like, because we know this went on for centuries. You do 300 years, that's over 22 million people. And we know that number's underestimated. We got some nut in here, I see. All right. We'll take care of you right quick. So we know that number's underestimated, right? But even using that number, there's 22 million of our brothers and sisters that went into slavery. And this is why we say that the transatlantic slave trade is the true Holocaust, not that of those so-called Jews, those so-called Jewish people. Not of that. At best, I think it was, I think 5 or 6 million. They say, but they took by their numbers over 20 million of us out of Africa into slavery, and over the course of centuries, enslaved us and our descendants. Even if you wanted to just stick with 22 million, the numbers aren't even comparable, right? But then you think about how many of our children, how many of our ancestors were born into it, died in it over the course of 3, 4, 5 centuries. But yet people want to say, well, why can't we just get over it? People want to be of the opinion that this doesn't affect our people today. And we're going to get into one aspect of that here, but there's so many. You cannot conduct that level of evil on a people for that amount of time and expect that, oh, now since I stopped, it's okay. Now since I apparently stopped, because we all know, again, after we were so-called freed from slavery, there was another 100 years of absolute legalized government sanctioned oppression. Now it's done in a different way. Now it's done more so through the legal system, and in a more subtle manner. Now they make laws that are just for us, but more subtly because they already did that before. Soon out of slavery, okay, fine. Now we got to put all these so-called black codes, these laws on the books to make sure that we can still arrest you to put you back into slavery. But for some reason, the world wants to say, oh, well, now it's not a big deal. We should get over that. That's in the past. But yet, when they find a Nazi who is 95, 6, 7 years old, when they find him, they absolutely put him in jail. But everybody who's still around, let's just go as far back as the so-called civil rights movement. There are people who are still alive today who lynched our ancestors. There are people who are still alive today who openly lynched our ancestors. There are people who are still alive today that do it now. They just wear badges and they say, "Oh, I was scared. I was afraid for my life, so I had to do it. Send me on a vacation. They call it administrative paid leave. So I get a vacation. I come back and work. All right, let's keep going. All right. Says Jamaica's earliest inhabitants were the indigenous Arawak. Who is familiar with that name? Who's familiar with that term? Who knows who the Arawak were? Who wants to give it a shot? Okay. Sister Sherlock, I no sweat. Who else wants to give it a shot? The Arawak. Arawak. All right, no sweat. Let me ask this then. Who's heard of the Taino Indians? Taino Indians were Israelites, as were the Arawak. All right. So it says Jamaicans were earliest inhabitants were the indigenous Arawak who were systematically exterminated by the Spanish between 1502 and 1655. It says when Britain seized control of Jamaica from Spain in 1655, the Arawak population on the island had long been annihilated, and the Spanish had been utilizing small numbers of African slaves as a source of labor. All right. Under British rule, nearly the entire island was transformed into one large sugar plantation, which necessitated the shipment of thousands of slaves to Jamaica. So, for the next 200 years, plantation owners relied entirely on so called African slaves for the cultivation of sugar. All right. None of this is really that surprising so far. Okay. Um, it goes on. It said in 16. This just shows the expansion because again, I mean they're all Edomites, but the British decided they was going to turn it up. All right. So in 1670, there were about 9,000 slaves in Jamaica, nearly barely more than the number of Caucasians. So it's about 1 to 1 at that point. In 1680, however, there were approximately 200,000 slaves in Jamaica, outnumbering whites 12 to 1, representing more than 20% of slaves present in the entire British Empire, and producing more than 50 tons of sugar every year, half of all British sugar production. So half of all the British sugar production came out of Jamaica by this point because they had expanded the slave trade that much. It says Jamaica was one of Britain's. Yeah, so Jamaica was one of Britain's chief sources for the cultivation of sugar, and therefore remained the focus of the British slave trade until it ended, quote unquote, ended in 1802. By which time there were over 300,000 slaves present in Jamaica. In the early 19th century, Britain officially ended, quote unquote, officially ended their involvement in the slave trade. As of May 1st, 1807, no British ship was allowed to leave the port with any cargo carrying slaves. And as of 1808, March, no slaves were to land in any English colony uh, from any ship whatsoever. All right. Oh, but it goes on. It says, but the participation in the trading of slaves did not end there. What had once been a legitimate form of commerce now took the form of clandestine smuggling operation. So what that means is they continued to do it, but now it's just not legal. I have to do it illegally. But they're still going to do it, and they still continued to do it. All right. This further legislation was passed in 1811, making the traffic and transportation of slaves a felony. Although new slaves were theoretically not being transported into British controlled lands, the slaves previously bought there were continuing to work under the same conditions. All right. Now, let me stop this real quick. Okay. So by this point, they're pumping out more than or half of Britain's total um, sugar exports. Right. But then they come along and say, hey, you know what? We're gonna slow the slave trade down. And then they eventually passed a law that made it a felony if they got caught importing slaves or using new slaves. And you can still use the old, but we can't bring any new ones in. What happens over time? What happens over time to your workforce? Let's see. Give a sister a hand. Outside of doing what they did here in America, where they were super efficient with the enslavement of people, unless you're deciding you're going to breed slaves, that's not, your labor force is going to diminish over time. People are going to pass away, people are going to die, and you don't have any new slaves to come in. So, what do you do? What do you do at that point? Let's see who can give it a shot. Over time, your labor force is going to diminish. All this free labor going away. These colonies are controlled at this point. Jamaica is controlled by Britain. What might be an alternative? Who wants to give it a shot? All right, let's see. So it says take better care of the ones you have, sure, uh, and work to get some legal ones in. Some illegal ones in. Well, they were doing that, but even that stopped. Oh, at a period of time. Even that stopped at a period of time. So they were still bringing them in illegally, and then they eventually stopped that. So your labor force is starting to diminish. What do you have to do? Think about what happens in America now. Like our ancestors did the agricultural work, right? We were in the fields, we were on the farms. That's what we were doing. And although it was over a longer period of time, today what happens? They don't have the quote unquote slave labor, not as much, right? And so who's employed? Who gets the agricultural jobs today? There you go. Give officer y'all the die. Impoverishment, poverty, and cheap labor. You look for the cheapest labor that you can find. And it has to be notably inexpensive because by comparison, you weren't paying anything. So you're looking for the cheapest labor, right? Where else have we talked about that Britain was controlling at this point? Where was it that the Aryans wrote their scriptures and their book? Let's see. It says as the end of slavery came into view, the English planters of the Mauritius began to look toward India to replenish their labor force because that's where they also had an influence, right? It says as of 1840, the primary labor force in the British colony of Mauritius, I believe is how you pronounce that, was indeed provided by 18,000 Indians. These are East Indians. These are not so-called Native Indians. These are East Indians. So simultaneously, due to the labor shortage, a period of severe decay began in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean because the slave labor was gone or started to diminish. So now we're having an issue. It says as the British West Indies had absolutely no alternative workforce, the plantation owners turned to India for laborers, just as the planters in Mauritius had. India filled the role, supplying the British Empire with cheap and disposable labor, and Indians were subsequently exported to meet the demand for said labor. Now, this almost sounds like slavery. This almost sounds like the transatlantic slave trade. But let's keep reading. Because the British government quickly designed an indentureship program to facilitate the exportation of a supplementary workforce from India to other parts of Asia, such as China. Now, this I just found hilarious. This next sentence. It says the first ship of Chinese laborers arrived in the Caribbean in 1837. For whatever reason, the Chinese workers were deemed unsuitable for plantation labor, and the Indians were subsequently used instead. Why might a Chinese person not be suitable for plantation labor? Who can tell me that? Because this didn't seem like, rocket science to me. When I read that, the first thing I thought was, if you take a whole bunch of Chinese people and pull them out in the sun in the Caribbean, I don't know that that's going to work. They don't have any melanin. I mean, that of course not. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. So for some reason, for whatever reason, they were deemed to be unsuitable. Damn right. Give up so y'all can die. Because Jackie Chan the only tough one in real life, apparently. Right. They ain't built for that. They are absolutely not built for that for some reason. All right. So, let me pull it back up. Says on May 10th, 1845, the ship Blundell Hunter landed in Jamaica's Old Harbor carrying the first load of Indian indentured workers to Jamaica. The workers were contracted to work on sugar plantations for a specific period of time before they were allowed to return home. In all, 36,412 Indians were brought to Jamaica between 1845 and 1917. After their contracts expired, 12,109 were able to return to India, while the rest made Jamaica their permanent homes. So, what's the difference? I mean, that almost sounds like slavery, except that, wait a minute, they said they were contracts, didn't they? This was contracted labor, right? This was contracted labor for a specific period of time. That's the difference. These were employees. They were contracted employees. Now, I'm not saying that the labor wasn't cheap because we've already said it was. They already established that. Sure. But this was contract labor. That is not slavery. That is the difference. Our people, there was absolute slavery. Once that was run out, okay, well, now we still need people to work. All right, we're going to get some people from India, pay them some small wages, bring them over here. What happens when they get here? Um, in relation to the former slave. Who can guess? Who can guess? What happens to you have all these 36,000 East Indian employees, contract employees show up. What happened as far as the relationship between them and the former slaves? Who wants to guess, knowing our people? Who wants to give it a shot? One second. All right, slack it. All right, anybody want to give it a shot? You know our people. Matter of fact, I will give it to y'all. Now these folks were coming over as, um, like I said, contracted employees, right? Where we were absolute former slaves. Okay, and here it says the Afro, they're calling them Afro Jamaicans now. Again, another example of bywords that we get called. The Afro Jamaicans demonstrated a great deal of respect for the Indian immigrants upon their arrival. When the first boatload of Indians arrived, hundreds of ex slaves had lined the roads, greeting them with food and drinks, and newspapers from the time are filled with reports of friendships developing between the two groups. We are receptive to everyone. We are receptive to everyone and everything. Now, this goes on to talk about how, what does it say? It says several factors are believed to be responsible for the close relationship between Indian and Jamaicans. It says such as equal socioeconomic status. That's not true. We weren't on an equal socioeconomic status. We were former slaves. You all came over here on a contract and negotiated employment time. That's not that's not an equal socioeconomic status. It says the development of mutual respect from working alongside one another. They showed up and we were happy. We hadn't even had a chance to develop a relationship. There was no relationship that was developed. We were just receptive to anything. Um, what else? A general camaraderie fostered through their minority status on the island. That's not the same minority status just because the oppressor is in charge. You're just an employee of them. Me and my people were absolute slaves, but we're receptive. Another example of how, again, their entire experience was marked, notably different than ours, right? Uh, and here's where you start to get the the crossing of the cultures and how we end up taking on other cultures because we don't know our own. Says the indentured workforce was joined by a small group of enterprising merchants who paid their own passages and sought to earn a living by supplying workers with goods and services imported from India. What this was that okay? You have some people saying, I'm gonna go over here, I'm gonna be an indentured servant for a minute over in Jamaica. You had other people in India, East Indians, say, you know what, this is a great opportunity to start a business. So I'll pay my own way and then I'll set up shop so that you can continue to have, although you're, all the way across the world working as an employee, I'll make sure you still get the goods and services and things that you're used to getting even back home. I'll get them imported from India. I'll charge you for them, and we'll have a business. I'll have a business, and guess what we have when we do it? When they do all that, there's a particular word I'm looking for. Guess what they are able to keep? We're able to keep by doing all of that because they went from East India to Jamaica to work, but some merchants from East India came over with them and set up an entire economic structure so that they could keep their culture, so that they could keep their culture and who they were and what they practiced, what they were used to doing, what they were used to eating, the customs that they were used to doing. Just because you're over there, we're gonna make sure you're still able to participate in your culture and your people and your belief system and your practices. Even though you're all the way over in Jamaica, we're gonna make sure you're able to do it here too. That's the benefit of not being a slave. That is the benefit of being a free person, a free man. You are able to move halfway across the world and still have and maintain your culture. And this was done purposefully, it was structured that way. 12 tribes of Israel, hey, you need to forget who you are and assimilate and acclimate into the culture that you live in. You don't need to be worried about being an Israelite. You should worry about being an American. You don't eat pork? You don't celebrate Christmas? Why not? That's what we do in America. And you should do that. And when you stop, and when you attempt to stop doing it, you start aligning yourself with God and the law, statutes, and commandments, your people are the first ones. Your family and friends are the first ones to tell you that that doesn't make sense and it's stupid. And how is that? And why is that? And why should I allow something to tell me what to do? And it's not that big a deal. And it's just a holiday. It's not even a holiday. I don't even really believe in it. It's just a time for us to get together because everybody's off. I just like giving my kids gifts. My kids want a Christmas. This is for the kids. But when these East Indians moved from India to Jamaica, they brought their culture with them. There was a system set up so that they can continue to be who they were. Let's keep going. Um, oh, wait a minute. Let me go back up real quick. Go back up real quick. It says it was through these laborers that Hinduism and the Indian mystical tradition was introduced to Jamaica, creating a cross cultural intermingling that would come to have profound influence on the development of new religious movements on the island, specifically Rastafarianism. This is how that happened. Because once our brothers and sisters were freed from forced and legalized slavery, they brought in cheap labor from India, and we began to take on their culture. And we're gonna get into all these different examples. All right, says there were Hindu priests among the laborers, and they would often lead the nightly readings, reading such scriptures after a day working on the plantation or during specific prayer meetings, as a primary component of the Indians' familial, social, and spiritual life in Jamaica. They had their entire culture and they continued it in Jamaica from their family to their social norms to their spiritual life and economic. Their entire culture came with them. That's how you know. Not saying that this was slavery, and anybody would say that, but it sounds that way, and you can get it a little confused at first. But that's the proof that there was nothing like slavery. A lot of times you hear people say indentured servitude. Well, that's almost like slavery. No, it's not. An indentured servitude, and this is an example of it. You're able to maintain your culture, who you are, your family. You're very independent. You just have a working contract. So if anybody tells you that it was similar, it's absolutely a lie. It says it was common on the weekends for Indians to celebrate with a community religious celebration, including formal prayers, rituals, so like dinners, music, and dancing. It says although these, I'm gonna keep going right here. Although these celebrations were initially only attended by Indians, the Indians' barracks on the plantation were close to those of the ex-slaves. As relationships began to form between the two cultures, so-called Afro-Jamaicans began to participate in the celebrations at various levels as well. This is why, this is again the example of why we are told to be separate. You get that. Deuteronomy 7 and 6. Deuteronomy 7, Deuteronomy 7 and 6 says, for thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy God, unto the Most High thy power. Holy meaning set apart. We are supposed to be separate. We are supposed to be a separate people with a separate culture unto ourselves, not aligning ourselves with these other nations, not taking on the habits and cultures of these other nations. That's not what we should be doing. Because the Most High thy power hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. That's where we're supposed to be. But the only way we can do that is to be separate and follow these laws, statutes, and commandments. By not being separate, by taking on these cultures of these other nations, we then remove the Most High's protection from us, which is why we always end up on the bottom of every culture we try to assimilate to. All right, keep going. Here we go. Because again, so many of our people feel and think that uh, dreadlocks and smoking weed is black culture, and it's not. It's not. It says initially these activities were restricted, meaning their whole worship and spiritual activities were restricted to Indians only. But as friendly neighborhood contact evolved with so-called Afro Jamaicans, the two cultures began to join in each other's rituals. Now, this is where, listen, when you're reading up on this history and stuff, oftentimes you have to be guarded with the presentation. Look for the facts, but you got to be guarded with some of this stuff because it says the cultures began to join in each other's rituals. We didn't have any rituals and culture. We didn't have any of that because it was stripped from us during the transatlantic slave trade. So clearly, there's no passing back and forth. It's us taking on other cultures. The only, if you wanted to say we had practices and cultures, it was of the oppressor. That's it. That's where Christianity, that's why so many of us are in Christianity, because we don't understand and we're not taught. We don't want to listen to what the Bible says. And so we just accept the culture of the other nation. So there was not any back and forth here. It was just us taking on East Indian culture. It says after ceremonies which involved the smoking of ganja, marijuana, the congregation will return to the home of the host, chanting and shouting, whatever that is, uh, drinking of marijuana, or bong, I think is pronounced. So they were drinking marijuana, they were smoking marijuana, hailing the goddess, and dancing and singing. That is what they were doing. And none of that is a cross back and forth. We're trading cultures. No, that's just the former slaves taking on the cultures of the East Indians. So as Indians had begun to share their bong and chillum pipes with the Afro Jamaicans, and ganja was believed to cause a decline in production. In 1913, the plantation owners in the Jamaican parish of St. Mary called for a ban on ganja. In 1915, the government of Jamaica outlawed its planting. So now it wasn't even legal, right? But we still perceive it to be the culture of black people in Jamaica. Why? Because we continue to do it. Just like here in America before they started legalizing it everywhere, we're gonna continue to do it. Because we think that's a black thing. We think it's something for us to do. No, you are not allowed to smoke weed. You're not allowed to smoke anything. Nowhere in the Bible does it say smoke something and inhale the smoke in your lungs as part of any ritual, as part of any recreation, and none of that. That's not what we're to do. And you can see here that that was not our culture until we started hanging around the East Indies. Because most of the Caribbean colonies to which it was initially exported, uh, this is talking about marijuana, such as Trinidad, uh, Suriname, I believe is how you pronounce it, in Guyana, of the growing of ganja withered out and virtually disappeared within a few decades. In Jamaica, however, ganja thrived and its use quickly became popular not only amongst its Indian forebears, but also amongst both rural and urban I hate this term, Afro-Jamaican populations. The size of the population in Jamaica between 1845 and 1917 was small in relation to other Caribbean colonies. Therefore, the Indians were viewed as posing little threat to established institutions and social arrangements, and virtually no attempt was made to assimilate them into a broader Jamaican society. They had no reason to, well, no, let me rephrase that. They maintained their culture. They were viewed as, oh, that's no big deal. It's not a threat. And this is specifically talking about the oppressor. This is not talking about us because we didn't have a culture, right? So there was no attempt to make them assimilate into the culture at the time because they were viewed as not a threat. Their numbers are small, so on and so forth. But we're constantly viewed as a threat, even when we're under complete subjugation, even when we're under a complete oppression. We're still looked at and viewed as a threat, a so-called threat. Don't have a cell phone in your pocket. Don't reach in your pocket for a piece of gum. Don't move too fast when you get pulled over. Don't look too hard at a police officer if he passes you by. I mean, it can all lead to the unaliving of us in a split second because they are supposedly always so petrified. Says for this reason, Indian culture elements, meaning food, clothing, and the use of marijuana, continued unimpeded and became part and parcel of the Jamaican culture. This again is the example of why we should be set apart. Because we don't view these things as threats. But what typically happens is we align ourselves with another nation and then unimpeded, their culture just takes over and we just accept it. We just accept it. Because by the late 1800s, the use of ganja had become widespread throughout the Jamaican countryside and it was widely used uh, by Indians and Afro-Jamaicans alike. Now, mind you, I hate this term, but they're specifying Afro-Jamaicans to make it clear that European Jamaicans were not participating in this. European Jamaicans were not befriending these people like this. European Jamaicans were not going back and forth, so-called swapping cultures and following their culture and things of that nature. How do you know it? Because they were outlawing weed. They were outlawing weed. But the Lord's sheep, who are just receptive to any and everything that any other culture gives us, and anything that anybody want to do, we want to go and hang out with the wolf. We want to go see what the wolf's culture is like. We want to go check out what the wolf is doing. I'm sure it's not going to be a problem. I'll just go start acting like a wolf. This is why we have to be set apart from these other nations. All right? So then you have Rastafarianism, which is a combination of many standing beliefs, rituals, discursive mechanisms that were pre-existing in Jamaica. Rastafarian bricolage, I believe is how you pronounce that, can be seen not only in the relationship, in the relation to the pervasive mysticism and ritualistic practices adopted from Hinduism, but also in intrinsically Judeo-Christian elements such as the citation of Bible verses. Now, this is the part I was thrown off about because I didn't know anything about Rastafarianism. It began as with the solid spirit of anti-European. Um, um, the oppressor is the devil. There's even now there's a perspective and understanding that so-called blacks are the real Jews. All of that, right? But they also have this tie to Hamites. They have this tie that they look up to Africans because in their mind, again, we're all African. Everybody who's black is African, which is absolutely wrong. And this is where I go back to the scripture I pulled before, the first scripture I pulled. They have a zeal, but not according to knowledge. If they had the proper understanding of the scriptures, they know that we're not the same people. It doesn't take much to break that back, break that down. Matter of fact, give me 1 second. Salah. All right. So, like I was saying, it doesn't take much to break down that we are not African. So, again, we've said this before. Trying to get it right. You don't want to work for me. There it is. Zondervan Bible Dictionary, right? When you look up Ham, it says one, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, one of 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes. He is not, Hamites are not tied to us. They have a zeal for the Most High, but not according to knowledge. And that leads them down that when we have a zeal with not according to knowledge, when we refuse to come into the ISUPK classes, when we refuse to listen to the priests and the prophets of the Lord, when we refuse to understand the basics of the Bible, even though they're milk scriptures, we want to go along with Christianity because we want to celebrate Christmas. We want to go along with Christianity because we want to believe God loves everybody. We want to believe we can celebrate Mother's Day and Father's Day. We want to give out candy on Halloween. We want to eat any and everything that we desire. We want to eat the shrimp, the crab, the clams, the oysters. We want to eat all of that because other people can do it. We want to vote so we can feel like we're part of the process. We want people to absolutely lie to us as far as politicians, and we're going to act like we believe them anyway because we want to believe that our ancestors died for this right to vote, right? We want to do all of these wicked things when it's nothing that we should be participating in. But when you decide to do that, at best you have a zeal for the Most High, but not according to knowledge. And you won't have it because you're not getting the proper breakdowns, the proper education, because you're not in class. All right, let's keep going. Um, Yep, it talks about how Rastafarianism maintains a decidedly Afrocentric interpretation of the Bible. They believe that, let me see, believe that the original Jews were held captive in Babylon are in fact African. See, this is where they got the right spirit, but then they lose it because they're not African, right? They believe that God's chosen people are still exiled via slavery in Babylon, where they suffer continual oppression by the white race. The discourse of Rastafarianism is centered upon the idea that African as Israelite and Africa as Zion, meaning Israel. This is what they believe. How does that make any sense? You got Ham, Jim, and Japheth. All the Africans came from Ham. Israelites descend from Shem. They have a zeal of the Most High, but not according to knowledge. Let's see. And because they have a zeal of the Most High, but not according to knowledge, what do? They take on these other practices like this. Rastafarianism is further characterized by the use of marijuana as a ritualistic sacrament and the wearing of long dreadlocks by members. That is about Hinduism. We just broke that down. We just went over that. The so-called pastors of the Hindu religion have dreadlocks and smoke weed. Now all of a sudden there's this Rastafarianism religion that originated in like the 1930s. Now all of a sudden, now we believe that the Jews are black, but they African, and Africa is Zion. And oh yeah, I gotta grow my dreads out and smoke weed because that's biblical. Like, what are you talking about? But this is how that happens. This is how that happens. This is us not being separate, not being a holy people and taking on the cultures and customs of other nations. So, obviously, Yagdar said earlier that, I'm going to pronounce the brother, oh, not brother, what's this cat's name? Haley Selassie. They believed he was Christ, all right? The reason why they believed he was Christ, so this Rastafarianism was started by four brothers, and they were following Marcus Garvey at the time, all right? And at some point, it says, let me see, in 1916, Marcus Garvey supposedly told a crowd, look to Africa for the crowning of a black king. He shall be the Redeemer, right? Now, fast forward to the 30s. Let me get to it. Is that it? Yes, fast forward to the 30s, 1930. They had the coronation of Haile Selassie, who was he became an emperor in Ethiopia. Okay, it says that coronation was therefore viewed by many Jamaicans, especially the Garveyites, that would soon to be Rastafarians, as an extremely significant event because Haile Selassie means might of the Trinity. That's Christianity. And he was awarded additional titles traditionally given to all Ethiopian emperors. So this was nothing new, right? But when he was given these additional titles, they saw that as a sign. So what are those titles? King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah. I don't even know how that's possible. Uh, Elect of God and Light of the World. These titles placed him in their mind in the lineage of King Solomon. Further added, this further added to his prophetic mystique and for believers to continue to serve as proof of his divinity. So this was, Garvey said like 14, 15 years earlier, looked at Africa. And then this cat gets coronated as emperor, and they put all these extra titles on him that are traditionally given to all emperors, and they see it as a sign that he's Christ. They see it as a sign that he's Christ, and now we have Rastafarian religion. Now, mind you, their Christ died, I believe, in jail in the 70s. And of course, they were completely distraught because that's Christ. So how is he? How did he die? So some people it just destroyed him. Now they don't believe anything. Other people, he ain't dead because that's what we do. We just don't believe it. That's why people still seeing Tupac. All right. Let me see. Um, yeah, here it is. It breaks it down a little bit more. It says in an interview, we're going to wrap up. It says in an interview, Joseph Hibbert, who was one of the four brothers that started Rastafarianism, recounted to an interviewer um, in 1921 he had acquired books to learn about the Indian deities. Um, After learning about the God incarnate, because their whole thing is they got a belief system that their gods are incarnate, they come down on earth and all that stuff. Let's say, but after learning about the God incarnate, he came to believe that every nation, every race had their own God. And as a result, when Haile Selassie was crowned emperor and given his auspicious titles, all those wonderful titles that again are given to every emperor of Ethiopia, he and others viewed him as God incarnate, the God of the Africans. Right. Give opposite Yagadar. They was smoking on some strong. For real. For real. And it goes on to talk about how, because like I said, it was the four of them that started it. One of them had an East Indian bodyguard. His name was, I think it was Lalu, Laloo. I'm gonna say Lalu. It says Lalu is also credited with the introduction of many mystical Hindu beliefs, practices, and language into the Rastafarian philosophy and prayers. Early Rastafarian prayers contain many Hindi, Bengali, Urdu words, and are believed to have been chanted in a Hindu mantra style. This, listen, Rastafarianism, dreadlocks, smoking weed, that is a Hindu belief system. That's what it is, and it was brought to our people in the Caribbeans based on their relationship and acceptance of East Indians who came over as uh, contracted labor. It's that simple. Our people don't know it. We gotta. That's why we gotta know this history, right? Because most people casually believe that dreadlocks and weed is a black thing because of how it took hold in Jamaica predominantly. And then, of course, you had the Edomite Bob Marley, whose father is an absolute Caucasian. He then became famous through his music. He was also a Rastafarian, so he believed in that. He promotes it. More people tag on to it. But again, we went to the reggae show. We went to the reggae festival, and everybody on stage except one was an Edomite. Everybody, the vast majority of people in the crowd were Esau. Why? Because that's not our culture. And going back to the colonization of India by Britain and the writing of their book by Aryan inhabitants in Britain, they got a lot to do with their culture. The foundations of it. They have a lot to do with the Rastafarian culture. They have a lot to do with the Hinduism religion. And then when we took it on, fast forward, the reggae festival is full of Esau, full of the oppressor. All right. Let me see. Is there anything else I want to make sure I got on this? Oh, it says along with the Indian influences reinforced. It's like it says although all these Indian influences reinforce the notion of religious pastiche. Um, it is rich. It is the ritualistic smoking of marijuana and the growing of long matted hair, which appear to illustrate the most direct connection between the two traditions. Right, because that's the strongest piece of Hinduism. There are, and I wasn't able to get to it, but there are there are holy men that believe they are supposed to stay in a constant state of connection with Shiva, which means they're smoking weed constantly. That's just what they're doing. They're smoking weed constantly and growing their dreads as long as they can, and all of it is connection with the God of Shiva. And then we took that on, made Rastafarianism, and then tried to pull in Old Testament, the Old Testament scriptures to make it make sense. And it absolutely does not. It's a complete lie. And this is what the things that we have to know so we can make sure. that we don't accidentally get caught up in these things. All right. And with that, I'm gonna get these security announcements. If there are no questions, let's see. All right. We're the Israelite, Slovakia. We're the ISUPK, started out at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Rule for a new brother or sister. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They are to be saluted only. They are here to shed themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher or the camp leader will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister is interested in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the camp leader to speak to a brother or sister. There's another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After this 6 month period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment, you can find it in Numbers the 18th. You can find it in Numbers 18 and 21, on Malachi chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. It means tenth. In the Hebrew, it's ma'ashara. That's 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. You can tithe it to the Treasury Department, or you can go to isupk.com and set up your tithe there. You can actually set it up so that it automatically comes out. It can you can set up a recurring thing. Sometimes I find that easier to do with some of these bills because I don't think about it and they just go away from me as soon as I get paid, and I don't miss the money as much. All right. And you'll be able to keep track of it through your PayPal account. All right. Priest fund is a free will offering for priests, and it's not mandatory. Whatsoever amount you would like to give. Upcoming High Holy Days is the memorial blowing the trumpets coming up in less than 2 weeks, September 15th. I believe that's going to be at the school in Newport News. So everybody make sure you are available. That is a Friday. We will have obviously more details as we get closer to the date. All right. And Slovakia. If any brother wants to be a trooper in the school, you need to start wearing all black. That's black pants, boots, shirt, war scarf, or headband. Make sure you get in contact with either Officer Urash or Captain Natsat Shah to let them know that's what you would like to do. All right. And with that, we say Shalom, Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shah Barakatam to the brothers, Yahweh Shamar Alatan Bashem, Yahweh Shah to the sisters. Shalom, Israel.